Okay. Hi guys. Welcome to day 4 of the Advent of Code. Sorry, today's video is a little bit late. So day 4 is essentially a word search. And for part 1, it's very traditional word search. So what you have to do is you have to find Xmas. But you have to find how many times it occurs. Now it can occur horizontally, both forwards and backwards, vertically, both upwards and downwards, and diagonally, upwards and downwards, so it can be reversed essentially. So they've given a big example here, and they give us this really big word search. So let's take a look at the code. What I decided to do for part 1, I just loaded in the file as normal. I'm working on this new workstation now, so that's why we're remoting and have different file paths to before. So we got the directions, and we've got a part 1 and part 2 counts. Now, because we have to traverse through the word search in part 2 as well, I decided it was more efficient to do parts 1 and parts 2 in the same loop. So what I did for part 1 was I said that if the grid at this coordinates, so we look through every row of the grid and then we look through every cell in each row. So we say that if we find a cell that's equal to X, then we're going to start seeing if MAS comes out from any direction around that. So we cast our U sizes that we get from here and here to I sizes, so that we can work with negative vectors, which allow us to go down and to the left. We do dx, dy in directions, and we say that if in MAS we iterate through that and we say dot all, so if every single one is true, that means then we have our pattern. So we enumerate through all the characters in that. We calculate where we're going to land, where we're going to end up. So we add our difference in y times our step plus 1. And then what we do then is we get from the grid, we get our x value from the grid, and then we get a y value from the grid. And if that equals to our character, then we increment our part 1 count. So not too complex there. That's all there is to it. It's part 2 that definitely does take a little bit more thinking to get your head around. So part 2, what they actually wanted was us to find this little MAS thing, and the dots can represent any letter. And it can also kind of be rotated as well, so that makes it a little bit more challenging. As you can see here, it occurs a lot of times. We get it 9 times in this list, and we have to find that. So let's take a look at the code for that. So bearing in mind that, as you can see up here, we're still in our for loop. What we do is we say that if the grid cell that we're looking at is equal to A, then I've defined this safe-get function, and the safe-get function basically just allows us to get from the grid and then get from the Y. So we could have used it up here, but I just did it to avoid repeating that bit so many times. So again, we cast our types so that we can work with negatives. And what we do is, so we're looking for our center character of that little square that they talk about, and we check the top left, top right, bottom left, and bottom right values around that square. So we safely get all of those values. And we're also checking if they actually do exist. So if they're not, if we get an A at the top left, then this is not going to work. Well, this will work, but we won't get these values, so our program's not going to crash. And because it can be rotated, any two of these values from P1 and P2 can be true. So for the condition that they demonstrate, for the little thing they demonstrate, if the top left is an M and the bottom right is an S, and the top right is an S and the bottom left is an M, then that's one of the conditions. So basically, we have to have one of these be true, and we have to have one of these be true, for it to be one of the special squares that we want to find. And if that is the case, then we just increment our part 2 count by 1. And then after we've gone through that loop, we just print out our part 1 and part 2 counts. So that's part 2. So not too complex. The main thing is understanding it, and that's probably what takes the most time. Once you get to the implementation, just like if you don't see it straight away that you're traversing and you end up traversing through the grid twice, then you can just refactor it to do it all in one for loop, and it's going to save you some time. It doesn't particularly matter because we've got quite a small word search, so it's very quick. But if we were working with a larger data set, then we would be looking for time and efficiency gains here. Alright, thank you guys.